So we will talk a little bit about the core web vitals today, specifically what they are, why they came about, and how to deal with them and how to measure them. So specifically, we'll start with what is it that we're talking about when we say we're talking about web page performance. Then I'll go a little bit into the core web vitals specifically. Then I want to talk about how the core web vitals influence Google search, specifically in the sense of the page experience ranking signal. And then we'll take a very short look into measuring core web vitals. Just to be clear, core web vitals is a topic that you can study hours at end. However, I only have a limited amount of time, so I'll brush over a bunch of concepts real quick. If you want to learn more, there's lots of resources out there. Google it. No, just kidding. I'll give you a few resources as well. And yeah, so let's dive into it. What is it when we talk about, oh, we have a performance problem, or the web performance at large isn't great, or our mobile web performance needs to improve, or what do we mean by that? And this is where things are getting tricky, because what it is we are trying to explain or quantify, so put numbers to something that is ridiculously subjective and ridiculously dependent on the nature of the website that you're looking at. Or what we're trying to figure out is how fast is a website for the user, and how well does it work for the user. So what I'm trying to say here is, how happy will I be? How big is my smile going to be when I'm using your website, right? Now, that's something that is really, really hard to put a number to. And it starts with, how do we measure this? What do we look at? And if we look at a website's life cycle, there's a lot going on, especially with modern websites that might be more akin to applications than traditional documents. So it's not that clear what we're looking at. And to elaborate on that, let's look at a metric that was one of the first things to look at when it comes to web performance, or one of the first metrics that came out. So I make a website and I want to know, how fast is my website? Is it going to dial up internet? Like the computer sings a song to you, and then magically, then you know that you serve the internet at certain times in the day, or actually in the night, because it was faster, right? That's what it was. So we had to wait for websites. We had to be like, type in the URL and wait for it to come. And mostly this was because transmission between my computer to the computer where the website lives and back took a long time. So it made sense to say, like, okay, so if I type a URL into my browser, I could measure the time between my browser sending off this request into the internet and the first bit of information coming back. Because this is the bottleneck. This on dial-up could take tens of seconds, maybe minutes, if you're on a really, really slow connection and the server was really far away. And there's also a physical limitation, right? If the server happens to be around the corner, then there's just physically not as much cable between me and that server compared to a server that is in Australia, the other side of the globe. There's just a lot more cable, even if we are using fiber where light signals are traveling. Light travels at a certain speed. You can't go faster than light. You can't even go as fast as light. You can get close, but you can't really go as fast as light goes. So that was a thing. That was the bottleneck. That was the biggest impact on how fast my website would be. How long does it take for my website to actually respond? And here, that was a very easy to measure metric, right? You just send a request, you wait until the first bits of data come back, and then you stop the clock and you go like, that's your time to first bytes. It takes 20 seconds. And then you're like, oh, no, why is that? Well, it turns out 3 seconds or 5 seconds are spent traveling through the network to the server. So we can shave these 3 seconds off relatively easily by having more servers around the globe, so that if I'm here in Zurich and I have a server in Frankfurt rather than in Melbourne, this is going to shave off these 3 seconds. Great. Now we're down to 7 seconds, but where do the rest of the seconds come from? Well, it turns out you wrote some code that runs on the server. It needs to talk to a database. The server is slow. The database is terribly structured. So 5 more seconds are just spent in there between like the request coming into the server and then your program doing whatever. So you would optimize your code, you would optimize your database, you would get a beefier server. And hey, look at that. We shaved off another 5 seconds. So from the original 10 seconds, we shaved off 7 seconds. So we're now down to 3 seconds. We made huge improvements, right? 70% of the time has been thrown off by just like making a bunch of optimizations. That's great. That's amazing. This is fantastic. It's easy to measure. Like, how hard can this be? Martin says this is going to be hard, but I don't really see how or why this could potentially be hard. Well, now look at a modern website, though. A modern website that uses JavaScript. We're having two computers connected over the basically identical network connections going to the identical server, and we're pressing return at the same time in the browser, so the requests are going out at the same time. And we have website A on the top, and we have website B on the bottom. Now, the request arrives at A and B at the same time, just for, being able, because it might possibly take different paths through the network, but let's ignore that. Assume we send it out at the same time, it arrives at the server at the same time. But now something peculiar happens. Because website A runs a Java, PHP, whatever, doesn't matter, program on the server that needs to go to the database to fetch the content. So it can't respond right away. Website B, however, uses JavaScript to fetch the content. So it can immediately send off the bare bones HTML. It doesn't contain any content. It only loads the JavaScript resources necessary to then fetch the content. But it can immediately respond with the static HTML that contains nothing. So website B has done it. Like, the time to first byte clock has stopped. Data has arrived at my browser. I still don't see anything. I, as the user, see nothing because the HTML doesn't contain anything. It needs to fetch the JavaScript to actually do anything. So I still see as much as I see for website A, nothing. But according to the metric of time to first byte, website B is done. Website B has been fast. This is great. This has been 2 seconds. Amazing. Website A, however, takes maybe 3 seconds. But when it comes back, the response contains, well, the content. Haha, surprise. So in website A's case, I now actually see stuff. I can start reading what's here. I can look at cute cats. Makes me very happy. Big smile on my users' faces. Fantastic. Website B, however, still shows me nothing because now we still need to go to the network, fetch the JavaScript. The JavaScript comes back. After 4 seconds, we have the JavaScript downloaded. Now we need to execute it. That maybe takes a second. So we're at 5 seconds. The clock's still running as far as I'm concerned as a user, right? Then it actually fetches the data, the images. That takes another 2 seconds. So at 9 seconds, probably, I'll start to see cat pictures. Whereas with website A, I see stuff after 3 seconds, or 2 seconds, or 4 seconds. So as a user, I'm definitely more happy with website A, as can be seen on the slide, right? I see cat pictures equals happiness. Yay! Website B, however, is better if you just look at the time to first byte. So if we're measuring performance by time to first byte, which used to be a good metric at the beginning, like 20 years ago, 15 years ago, that has been a great metric to figure out what the users would experience. But in today's world, it's not a good metric because the metric clearly, the worst performance as far as the user is concerned, gets the better score. So that can't be it. We can't just be like, oh, okay, so this is a very technical metric. It's easy to measure too. It's super easy. I can just get a device somewhere, a computer, laptop, Raspberry Pi, phone, whatever, somewhere in the world, and let it make requests and measure how long it takes until the response comes back. But this tells me apparently not enough to judge if a user has a good time on my website, if the user has the experience of a fast website. It doesn't work. Sure, if time to first byte is ridiculously high, then that is a problem that we need to address, and there's ways to address this, as I discussed. But it's not giving you the complete picture of how good and fast this website is for a real user. So we can't just do that. So lots of very, very smart people started thinking about this and were like, okay, so time to first byte doesn't work. Maybe we can measure until like we can keep the clock running until everything that has been referenced has finished downloading. So all the JavaScript needs to finish downloading, and then we stop the clock. Yes, good idea. However, that might still mean that like the page might still be empty. It has finished loading the JavaScript, great, but now the JavaScript needs to run and then actually make more network requests that come out of the blue for the browser. So we don't know when to stop the clock. And then they're like, okay, but maybe we can wait until the JavaScript has finished executing, huh? How about that? Yeah, but what if a bunch of the content only loads after I click on a button? Because then the clock would have stopped, and then I click on the button, and then it takes 10 seconds for the actual content that I'm interested in to show up. Still not a good experience. And they're like, okay, fine, fine. So maybe we can figure out some more sort of measurement that tries to track visual change over time. And then that would be better to figure out when actually stuff is shown. Or maybe we can try to figure out when the browser first paints. That's not bad. But when it only paints like the header and the main content of my page doesn't load, that's not really helpful. So maybe we can try to figure out what's the most important or meaningful thing of the page, and then we could measure when that's put on screen. That's the first meaningful paint. Yeah, that sounds good. But if I'm trying to, let's say, like order a pizza, and the menu shows up real quick, but then I click on it and nothing happens for 10 seconds, that's frustrating for the user. So it's not only about visual things showing up on the screen, it's also about how quickly can I actually do something with the content that is shown on the screen. So that would be time to interactive. So, okay, cool. And like we kept iterating, and this iteration process hasn't stopped yet. So people are like, yeah, web performance, like you just need the Lighthouse score. No, no, absolutely not. The web keeps changing, the use of the web keeps changing, and it is intrinsically hard. It's very, very fundamentally hard to figure out how good something works for a user and to put a number to it. And Lighthouse scores and what not other tools exist are basically a simplification that just gives you a rough idea where you are, but it's not like a precise, it's not like a temperature measurement. It's more like sticking your thumb up in the wind and going like, yeah, there's wind, and it's roughly coming from over there. That's what it is. It's not a precise measurement whatsoever. And our understanding of how we can put numbers to the actual user experience keeps evolving and keeps improving and keeps changing because these smart people are still at it and still trying to figure out what's going on there. And then there's the problem with the metrics themselves, because I mentioned a bunch, and a bunch of them are not in use anymore. For instance, first meaningful paint is not really being used. Why? Because it has been too sensitive. So you would have a website that changed, like nothing changes about this website. And sometimes you would get a really good metric. Sometimes you would get a really bad metric because there is this inherent fuzziness of what is the meaningful content here? I don't know. Is it the big image? Not really. I don't care about the image. I scroll past it. The text is important. But the image is pretty big. And it's like the first thing, maybe it is the image. So like there are heuristics, there are guesswork is involved kind of. And sometimes the guesswork is wrong. So you don't touch your website and the scores are all over the place. How useful is that metric? How can you make any decisions based on a metric that keeps fluctuating no matter what you do? That's not a useful metric. On the other hand, time to first byte, for instance, is not sensitive enough, right? We had seen a website with fantastic time to first byte, but terrible user experience. So that's not fine enough. So we need to figure out the granularity. Also, again, with time to first byte, that was a metric that showed that sometimes metrics don't actually measure what users care about. Same with time to interactive. Like maybe it's a Wikipedia page, and when the content shows up on my screen, I don't care if I can click on it or not because I'm busy reading anyway. So it doesn't matter as much, maybe. So maybe this is not really the best metric to look into. And also, I want to be able to measure these metrics both in field and in lab settings. So field settings means I want to be able to collect this information from my real users so that I know how data is out there. But I also want to be able to basically just run this on my own computer just to get a feeling for how it changes. Like I want to run this with the old version of the website on my computer, get a baseline. Okay, so we're roughly in the 50s in the scoring maybe. And then I make a change and like, ooh, now we're in the 80s. So my changes, whatever they were, have improved things. Or oops, now we're in the 10s. So it has definitely decreased in terms of the metrics. And I want to run this in lab settings, so on my own devices in controlled conditions, so that I can get comparable data. Because with field data, you don't get this, right? You may have 1 month with everyone coming in on fiber connections on their latest MacBooks, having great scores, and then next month, without anything changing, you have lots of people from countries further abroad that are farther away from your server and might be on older devices, and they might be on shaky network connections. And I mean shaky mobile network connections, that's Germany in a nutshell. So if you have lots of users from Germany in 1 month and then lots of users from Switzerland in another, you might see a change in core web vitals or any other metrics that you have real user metric data from, without actually having done anything. And that doesn't mean that you screwed up. It just means like, ooh, more people are on my website and they are experiencing the website differently. So we need to adapt. We need to look into this. Or maybe it's just an outlier and you're like, yeah, no, this is fine. This is not looking great, but this is because X, Y, Z, and we don't really care about that. But I want metrics that I can gather in both settings. And also, as I said, there has been like all these different metrics, and metrics kept coming and going randomly. You're like, oh, now my time to first byte is really good. My website is fast. And then someone says like, yeah, but actually your first contentful paint is really, really slow. And you're like, oh, come on. I just optimized my website and now it's slow again. Come on. It feels like the Don Quixote kind of situation, like fighting the windmills, and that it just keeps coming and it's not great. So that has been tricky. And also, if you have pushed for making performance improvements and you've done them, and then the reporting changes in the tools that you're using, and you're like, we did a good thing here, but the data doesn't show it anymore. How do you sell that to management or executives, right? It's like, well, we started with a lighthouse score of 60, and then we put a lot of effort in, and now we have a lighthouse score of 60. It's like, what? So nothing changed? And it's like, actually, lighthouse scoring changed. So the old lighthouse score would now be at 90. So there is a significant improvement. However, because of the understanding of what performance is having changed, yeah, it doesn't matter as much anymore what we did the last 3 months. Great. So that's not fantastic. So what are the core web vitals then? Well, the core web vitals are metrics similar to the metrics that I listed that have been used in the past for web developers, for SEOs, for everyone to measure and quantify and improve the user experience that people are having with a website. And you can find this data in Lighthouse, and the Chrome developer tools, and page speed insights, and Search Console. Web page test shows it. There's JavaScript APIs reporting on these things if you want to plug it into your own tooling. And the goals of these metrics, so the thresholds that I'll be showing you in a moment, can be achieved. And a lot of websites do achieve them. I still get like people pinging me like, hey, 90% of the websites I manage are failing in them. I'm like, that's bad. But it's not representative. It's not saying like 90% of the web are failing these metrics. No, the bulk is actually not failing these metrics. So you are actually below median and below average. So you want to push, right? Even if your sample is actually a bad sample, that doesn't mean that no one else can do it well, right? It might be in your niche, everyone does it badly, which is great, because that means like if you're doing it better than them, then you're ahead of the rest of your niche. Great. But yeah, we also try to address the moving goalposts issue, where we say like our goal is to change the core web vitals or the goals associated with them on a roughly yearly cadence. So instead of just like changing them every now and then, they roughly will be stable for a year, and then we might potentially update and change the way that we measure them. But what are these core web vitals? It's basically 3 new metrics. Metric number 1 still looks at visual completeness, because for users to be happy, they need to see your content. So that's actually an important thing. And the question there is, how fast can I see the main content? Not just the footer or the header. When can I see what looks like it's the majority of your website? The idea is to be below 2.5 seconds for this. So the metric is called the largest contentful paint. So what's the largest paint in the browser where content actually shows up? If you are below 4 seconds, then you're probably in an okay range. You want to improve on that. But if it takes longer than 4 seconds, that is also from perception psychology perspective, it's not a good thing that it takes you this long. But you notice specifies when the main content is likely visible, because what is the main content? It's guesswork, effectively. Like the browser needs to guess what it thinks is the main content, and then reports back on whenever that shows up. So that's not necessarily a hard and fast metric that will be very, very specific and stable. The second thing that we want to measure is how quickly can the user expect to be able to interact with your content, right? So from opening the page to showing things, how long does it take until when I click a button, something happens? What's the delay between that? So that's the first input delay metric. You want to be below 100 milliseconds. That's generally a good threshold. If it's within 300 milliseconds, you're probably still fine. But users start to feel a lag, a delay between what they do and the action that happens. Under 100 milliseconds, it feels instantaneously anyway. Last but not least, we want to figure out how stable it is visually. And you probably know where I'm going with this. You probably had a website that let you scroll, and it's like, ooh, that's the thing I want to click on. And while your finger moves towards the screen, something pops in and it shifts up or down, doesn't matter. And you click on something completely different, and you're like, oh, why is this loading now? I didn't want to, oh, right? These jumps are very, very jarring, very annoying to users. So you want to minimize that. And the metric for it is called the cumulative layout shift. Good values are between below 0.1. Okay is between 0.1 and 0.25. What is this 0.1 though? Like there's no unit attached to it. Before we had milliseconds and seconds and stuff, but what is the unit here? Actually, I don't know what unit it would be, because the thing is, the way it's calculated is how much of your website is affected and by how much does it shift. So in this case, we have a website that has two elements, the gray text and the green background text, 50-50 of the website. Now this button pops in and it shifts the lower half. So 50% of the content are being shifted. So I have a 50-50 chance of clicking on something that has now moved. And the button itself shifts the lower half by 14%. So you take the 0.5 for the 50% that are being shifted and multiply it by the 14%, 0.14, and then you get 0.07. So this shift would actually, even though it is relatively significant, would still be within acceptable limits. But I assume the button would do the same thing on the top. So 100% of the content, everything shifts by 14%. Now we're at 0.14, which is more than the 0.1 threshold. So it is very likely, because 100% of the content shifts, that whatever you're clicking, it has moved to somewhere else. So it is more annoying than having a chance of 50% of clicking on something that has shifted. So that's how this is being calculated, but it's not really percent. I don't know what unit this would be, but yeah, if you have ideas for the unit, just let me know. We can call the unit 0.07 splitties, if that helps. I don't know. But that's how this is calculated, and this is what it represents. So what can you do about the core web vitals? Well, first things first, if you go to web.dev/vitals, there's lots of information. If you want to learn more about the three metrics that I just talked about, definitely check that out. Definitely go there and read on what's new. You can also just Google for core web vitals. You'll find lots of articles explaining them to you. And they are used in many places, and they are shown in many places, so it makes sense to understand what you're looking at, right? Also test all your versions. If you have an AMP version, if you have a mobile version, if you have a desktop version, test these versions to see how they are performing, how they're doing, and make sure that all your users, no matter what version they land on, are having a good time. You can use Lighthouse or Headless Chrome to automate these things. So what I think is a good thing is to do this as part of your development cycle, that whenever, like, I don't know, daily, or whenever someone checks something new in like new code, have it run for core web vitals testing in lab settings, because that allows you to figure out, did my stuff make it significantly worse or better? It will always jitter a little bit. There will always be some noise, like maybe the first contentful paint, the largest contentful paint sometimes will be like 1.5 seconds, sometimes will be 1.4 seconds, sometimes might be 1.7 seconds, and maybe sometimes just 1 second. So it'll jitter a little bit. But if you sometimes see like you start with anything between 1 and 2 seconds. That's your baseline. And now this new change that a developer made pushes that to 3 seconds. That's a problem. That's something that this developer definitely needs to address. So automation is actually very, very helpful, because then the developer gets feedback like, oh, whatever I did is not doing well on the website. So I need to like change this and work on that. So why do I even talk about Core Web Vitals at an SEO event? Well, the reason is that Core Web Vitals are actually a part of the page experience signal in Google search. What are we talking about when I say Google search page experience signal? In May or June, I think we launched. I think we pushed back to June. Don't remember. It was announced from May this year. I think it launched in June, actually. We launched a new ranking signal, the page experience ranking signal. And I would say a new ranking signal, because it's not really a new ranking signal. It's using existing ranking signals and changing them up a bit, I would say. So for instance, we already had page speed and user experience things as ranking signals, but now we're using the Core Web Vitals for that instead, which I think is more transparent, because beforehand it wasn't clear how we are measuring page speed. Now it is kind of clear. We are using field data from the Core Web Vitals for it. Other things like mobile friendliness, safe browsing issues, HTTPS, and intrusive interstitials are also being factored into the new page experience signal, and that is used in ranking. But again, page speed and mobile user experience have been ranking factors beforehand and have been for quite a while. But that and the new Core Web Vitals, instead of whatever proprietary page speed measurement we had beforehand, is going to form this, or is forming this new page experience signal that we're using in ranking. And it has launched, it is live, it has happened. Probably a bunch of people noticed small changes. Some other people might have noticed slightly bigger changes. AMP is no longer a requirement for top stories carousel. So that's a nice side effect, because with AMP, it was easy to figure out how fast the website would potentially be on a user's device, but now we can use the Core Web Vitals to estimate that. So we no longer need AMP as a requirement for the top stories carousel. Definitely check your pages for any mobile user experience issues, or if there's any Core Web Vitals issues. Search Console has the Core Web Vitals report, page experience report now, and it helps you figure things out. You can use the live test, you can use mobile friendly tests to figure out if there's any usability issues for mobile users, and that will help you debug these problems. Last but not least, talking a little more about measuring things. First things first, when it comes to Core Web Vitals, remember these things are not like temperature measurements. They are more like a weather forecast kind of situation, where you're looking at a radar picture and going like, I guess it's raining over there, looking at the cloud density and the radar echo that we're getting here. It's not an exact measurement. It will always jiggle a little bit, but you need to look at historical data and see like, okay, so it was jiggling here, and now we made a change. Now it's jiggling over here. So there's like this delta is not noise. This delta is actually what you're looking for. And you want to see things getting better, things getting faster. You don't want things like getting slower or jumpier or jarring, more jarring. So don't look for the exact metrics. Look at them as trend lines. When we talk about Core Web Vitals in search, in Google search, remember page experience takes the Core Web Vitals from field data, not lab data. So people were like, oh, well, what if we're showing a different version to Googlebot than we show to users because we're dynamically rendering? It doesn't matter, because real users are seeing the real website, and that's the data that we are looking at. We can also group pages for an individual site if we don't have enough data on pages that have very little traffic. But don't worry too much about it. It's just a matter of like, you should be interested intrinsically to make your website better for your users, and Core Web Vitals is a tool that helps you, and the page experience signal is the thing that rewards you for it in search if you did your homework there. Again, just use them as rough indicators. Look at the trends, look at the bigger picture. Don't look at specific single points in time, because they don't tell you as much. Also, please don't inflate or overinflate the meaning of the Lighthouse score. Lighthouse is just a tool for developers and for you to test things on your local computer. It's great, but the Lighthouse score tries to give you a rough indicator. It's not a precise measurement tool. It doesn't matter if Lighthouse score is 94 or 95. What matters is it 30 or is it 90? That's what you're looking for. You don't look for, oh, we improved from 50 to 52. Means nothing, because measure 3 more times and you might get 49. It doesn't matter. It's not a precise tool. It's an indication of where you're going and what's the general direction of travel. And it's not like a specific precise measurement. And Lighthouse score specifically mixes a bunch of the other metrics into this one score. So it can be that a metric that you don't really care about as much, or that doesn't matter as much for your specific website, is dragging it up or down, and that's actually not reflecting what real users in the field are seeing, right? Which brings me to lab data and real user metrics. Again, lab data should be used to establish a baseline of where are we in terms of performance, and then you make changes, and then you measure in lab controlled conditions, like on my computer or on this specific computer in the office. We always measure once a day our Core Web Vitals metrics with Lighthouse, I don't know. And we are seeing that it used to jitter around 50, now it jitters around 60. Sounds like a mild improvement. And then the next day it jitters around 80. You're like, yay! The day afterwards it jitters around 30. And you're like, oh, no, that's not good. These are the things that you want to do. You don't want to be like, oh, it's 49 today, it was 50 yesterday. We need to call in all hands with the developers. Don't. Right? That's not reasonable. More interesting, as far as I'm concerned, is real user metrics, where you are getting feedback from users that are actually experiencing your website. And you can be like, yeah, but what if all my customers are coming from a country with slow devices? Make it fast for them. Like, that's not a disadvantage. That's just the reality. Your customers are in a country with bad internet. Make your website work for them, because it will end up with happier customers who are probably buying more from you. So it's not like, oh, it's unfair. Everyone else, like this company has only Swiss customers and they have like 4G on the highest mountain in Switzerland, and we're here in Germany where the chancellor was like, internet is Neuland, and we have like Edge and it's terrible. It's where your customers and users are. Serve them. Help them. Don't let them like struggle because like I'm more interested in people from internet countries where they have internet that is internet and not like, this other thing. So use them as an opportunity to figure out how real people are actually experiencing your website, rather than being like, oh, it's unfair that this is compared to these other people. And no, that's just what it is. And it's a harsh truth. It's the truth that you have to live with. Your users are suffering in certain countries, and if that's your main markets, you want to fix that. Now to the tools. So I picked 3 tools. I already spoke a little bit about Lighthouse. Great for getting lab data, great for running it on your own machine. But because it runs on your own machine, if your machine happens to be, I don't know, converting video while you're running it, it might get different data. If you have certain extensions installed, you might get different data. If your internet is just being a little laggy right now, then you might get different data than what the real users are seeing. So it is very possible that you're seeing great scores, fantastic, my fast internet connection, my fast modern laptop, fantastic scores, but then the real world users out there are not seeing the same thing, and that's because the real world does not work like lab conditions. And it is great to get like an idea of what's happening over time and what's the baseline, and use it for development and making strategic decisions on if something should launch or not launch. But it's not like a thing for estimating real world performance. PageSpeed Insights again runs on controlled conditions, more or less. It runs on cloud service, and if available, there are real user metrics as well. There's field data available for pages. It will show you that, and then you can like compare these two, and that's actually pretty cool. So it's a little more useful than Lighthouse, but it's not the width's end. Same with web page tests. It's still kind of lab data, even though it might run on real devices in the cloud. But again, it's lab data. It doesn't really actually give you real world user data. And to show you, to illustrate this, I took a measurement of a page on PageSpeed Insights. And you look at the score, like the big thing on top says 50 and it's yellowish. We are on the lower boundary between needs improvement and bad. Oh my God, this is terrible. Like, we need to immediately call everyone in the house together to like figure this out, because this is the worst thing that could possibly happen. But is it? Is it though? Well, actually, like you need to improve a bit, but you're not doing too bad. If you look at the field data instead of the lab data that generated this 50 score, you're seeing that first input delay, 17 milliseconds. 17 milliseconds is far away from 100 milliseconds, so that's really good. Cumulative layout shift, 0.02. Again, minimal shifting. That's awesome. That's fantastic. Largest contentful paint, well, that's 2.9 seconds. That's not great, but it's okay. 70% of your users are experiencing a better value. 18% are in this bucket, and then 12% are seeing a worse value. So it's something that you want to improve on, sure. We probably want to be under this, like, what is it, 1.4 seconds, but it's not the world's end, right? It's okay. We can improve this. We can figure out why the largest contentful paint is not great, but it's not like ring the alarm bells, battle stations, everyone, we need to fix this. This is a huge emergency. It's not. It's not an emergency. It's something that you want to keep an eye on, but don't let lab data necessarily fool you. In this case, lab data is for some reason a lot worse than it is for real users out there. And that can be that your real users actually are closer to your server, and the cloud system that is doing the measurement is really far away. But your main market is near your server anyway. Why would you invest in a server overseas if that's only where the tool that you're measuring with lives, and all your users are in Europe and your server is in Europe and they're seeing better data? It doesn't make that much sense, right? The cost and the benefit are in no good relation. So yeah, with that, I'd like to say thank you a lot for your time. Thanks a lot for having me at SEO Campix. And if you want to reach out to us through, or follow us on Twitter. You can reach out to me on Twitter as well. I'm Geekonaut. Our Teams channel is Google Search Central or Google Search C. So we're not really responding to things there, but we're sometimes reading a little bit what's going on over there as well. You can also check all our documentation out at developers.google.com/search. And we have a YouTube channel, Google Search Central, where we do bi-weekly Q&A sessions where you can ask us questions live, and we will record these. We also publish informational content there as well. Yeah, so check us out on YouTube, check us out on Twitter. Thanks a lot for your time. Have a great SEO Campix, and enjoy the hopefully good weather. I don't know what the weather is in Germany right now, but I hope that you have good weather. Thanks a lot.